My husband is a painter. Well, that's a stretch. He does very modern, Jackson Pollock-style art. I've seen him in the studio, and he's not so much painting as he is flinging paint at the canvas with his bare hands. Strangely, though, people pay real money for his work. His most recent one, gray and blue splatters on a gray canvas entitled Ocean Dawn, fetched us a cool $3,000. He makes a full salary off his work, and then some. I don't get it. Maybe the people who buy his work are smarter or more cultured than me. They all fit a very specific type, well-dressed men with distinguished salt and pepper hair, petite blonde wives that look like they've never eaten a slice of cake in their lives. Money to burn, put on the dog types. Although, if it's a choice between one of my husband's paintings and a Louis Vuitton purse, well, his paintings are, marginally, less ugly than those purses. Man, what is it with rich people and ugly stuff? Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent here. The reason why I'm writing this is because my husband has been away for the past 2 weeks visiting family. While he's been gone, I've been running the business by myself, and I've noticed some odd things. His studio is a really nice space downtown. Large and full of light. Filled ceiling to floor with his paintings. And even though they're individually ugly, there's something sort of beautiful about them being all together. The different colors and splattering types all match and coordinate with each other. It's obvious they're all done by the same artist. Maybe that's why he makes money off them. They have a distinct style. You can point to one and say, with certainty, that's a Theodore Waters painting. The thick globs of paint, the colors that don't really go with each other, that's a Waters right there. I could put on a smock and throw paint at a canvas while listening to Gregorian chants, too, but I wouldn't be able to produce paintings that consistently resembled each other in style. The first few days went well. We had a minor hiccup. I almost gave the woman buying Evening Tranquility the wrong painting. They looked identical to me. But I was enjoying it. After work, I'd head to the studio for a few hours and binge dramas on Hulu, waiting for the next client to come by. Things took a turn for the worse, however, on Wednesday night. My iPad ran out of battery 20 minutes before the last client was supposed to show up. So I just sat there, staring at the paintings. I got up and rearranged them a little. I pulled out the piece that was supposed to be sold tonight, Midnight Dream. It was one of the less ugly ones, if only for its color scheme. Black canvas, or possibly navy blue, splattered with purple, mauve, indigo, and white. And just a few dots of ocean blue drizzling across the front. I leaned it against the other paintings and sat back at the desk, taking off my glasses and rubbing my eyes. Damn allergies. When I looked back up, however, I froze. With my glasses off, Midnight Dream was now blurry. And with all the random splatters blurred now, I could see a clear shape. How there were less splatters, more darkness, in the center of the canvas. That looked exactly like the silhouette of a person. A person leaned over the viewer, staring down at them. What the? I put my glasses back on. But with all the clear dots and drizzles and specks, I could only barely make out the image. Was that why people were buying Theodore's paintings? Because there was a second, hidden image? It didn't make sense, though. I'd seen Theodore making some of these paintings. He was randomly flinging paint on a canvas, listening to those calming Gregorian chants or whatever they were. There was no way he could plan where the paint fell to create a second image. Unless he was somehow going back and painting over some of the paint splatters later. Though I didn't see any brush strokes to imply that. I got up and pulled out another one of Theodore's paintings. Entitled Pink Marble, splatters of pink and red and white. I leaned it against Midnight Dream, stepped back, and took off my glasses. It was a hand. A hand covered in splatters of blood. My stomach did a little flip. I felt nauseous. It's just art, I told myself. People do extreme art all the time. What about that one where that giant guy is eating a man? That's like in an art museum and everything, right? Nothing wrong with painting a bloody hand. Nothing wrong with painting a shadow person glaring down at you. And maybe I was wrong. There wasn't much detail in these images, just the suggestion of forms. It could be pareidolia, my brain assigning familiar shapes to the paintings. Like a Rorschach test. Maybe these were random blobs and it was just my imagination. I took out another painting. This one was pretty ugly, muddy shades of brown and green around the edges, a big pink blob in the middle. Spring Blooms was the title. I leaned it against pink marble and stepped back. Closed my eyes, let out a breath. Took off my glasses. I opened my eyes. Oh, no! The pinkish blob, now blurred at a distance, was clearly the shape of a woman's body. Laying on the ground. Splattered with blood. Why would he paint this? And who would buy this? Who would want a painting of a dead body in their home? I swallowed, my throat dry. I put on my glasses and slid the painting back in with the others stacked up. Was this the reason Theodore was actually making money? He was selling these paintings to sickos that were camouflaged well enough to stay hung up through dinner parties and visits from the in-laws? I texted the client who was supposed to pick up Midnight Dream and told them I wasn't feeling well. Then I drove home, stomach twisting, and locked myself inside. But I didn't exactly feel safe in the house either. Because Theodore had a few of his own paintings hanging on our walls. I realize now, as I viewed them from a distance, that the painting in our living room depicted a close-up of a woman's face, but something black was oozing out of her mouth. Vomit? A spider? Not enough detail to tell. And the huge one in our bedroom, hanging above our bed, looked like two lovers embracing, except they appeared dead from the ashen gray tint of their bodies. This was sick. And it didn't even make sense. I remembered when Theodore painted this one, but one of the lovers. I had watched him for more than an hour. He was just flinging paint randomly as he listened to the weird chanting music he always played. Yet the blobby shapes clearly suggested two people embracing. I decided to sleep in the guest room that night. But before I did, I made the mistake of walking into Theodore's home studio. I'd left the lights on, somehow, so I stepped into the studio, my heart pounding. It was a lot more cramped than the one downtown, only about 100 square feet, with a huge stack of paintings in the corner. As I reached for the light switch, I noticed the unfinished piece on the easel. I'd seen it several times over the last few weeks. But now, I saw it differently. I took off my glasses and took a few steps back, out into the darkened foyer. It was a woman, lying on a dark wooden floor, splattered in blood. Except that woman was me. Of course I couldn't be sure. There wasn't enough detail. But from the colors that looked like my favorite gray sweater, my hair split out on the floor. I backed away. Then I ran out of the house. I drove all night until I got to a friend's place. That's where I am now. Theodore has tried to call me, but I've let all his calls go to voicemail. Every time I close my eyes, I see the painting. The splatters of paint that look just like my dead body. My life has always been a mess. Well, as far back as I can remember, my room is almost a black hole of clothes and books, and my schedules are even worse, with breakfasts at 8 p.m. and dinners at 3 p.m. That said, I decided it was time to try to change these habits. Now that college is over and I've landed a steady job, it wouldn't just be good but also necessary to change this aspect. In a conversation with a friend, he told me about this category of apps that aim to simplify routines by offering the possibility to add tasks with reminders and all. I confess I found the idea very promising. I'm not messy by choice or anything, it's simply a matter of forgetfulness, and perhaps downloading one of these could solve the issue. So, following his advice, I decided to look for a task list app in my phone's app store. There were some more minimalist ones, others with an RPG vibe, giving you XP and items for completing tasks. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not that much of a nerd. Just when I was about to give up due to indecision, a pop-up appeared in the corner, an ad for an app called Taskmaster Pro. The ad read, "Transform your life with Taskmaster Pro. Organize your routine, achieve your goals, and reach the success you've always wanted." Intrigued and a little desperate for a solution, I clicked on the ad and was directed to the download page. The app had a clean and modern interface, with positive reviews and a promising description. I decided to give it a chance and downloaded the Taskmaster app. Upon opening the app, I was greeted by a simple tutorial that guided me through creating my first task list. I tried to start with the basics, so I opened it and entered the objectives. Wake up, 8 a.m. Go to the gym, 9 a.m. Work, 10 a.m. Lunch, 1 p.m. Study, 3 p.m. Dinner, 7 p.m. Read, 9 p.m. Sleep, 11 p.m. It seemed like a good start. Satisfied with the list, I closed the app and went on with my day, hoping that organizing my life would significantly improve it. I woke up to the alarm at exactly 8 a.m. The day went on like this, with tasks buzzing in the notifications, and I completed them. To my surprise, it was very effective. That day had been the most productive in who knows how long. I slept like a baby that night and woke up even more refreshed the next morning. Thus, a few days passed, and I began to mold into the routine, and indeed, I was pleased with the app. But something happened. A week after I had installed it, I was doing my nightly reading, almost finishing The Shining, when my phone's ringtone made me jump out of my chair. Even with the screen locked, I could see it was a Taskmaster notification. Strange, I thought, it's not bedtime yet. I picked up my phone, curious about this, and opened the app, my anticipation building as the blue background with white letters indicated the app was starting up. The screen lit up and displayed the task list as expected, but when my eyes scrolled to the bottom, I choked. I froze as I read. Do not look back, 9:45 p.m. I stood still for a few moments, staring at those words. What the hell was this? Some kind of prank? A tasteless joke? I don't know. But there's something almost intuitive when you receive an order. Ever heard of the Milgram experiment? Well, it's like that. The truth is, it made me tense, very tense, especially as I remembered that behind the chair where I was sitting was the window to my backyard. I could feel tiny droplets of sweat forming on my forehead, and I was alert, trying to hear any noise coming from there, but I heard nothing, just dead silence. Take a deep breath, I thought. Maybe it was some kind of app glitch or a tasteless joke. I tried to convince myself of this as I got up from the chair, trying to ignore the chill running down my spine. I turned off the office light, still not looking back, and left through the door, closing it behind me. I walked to the bedroom, trying to distract myself with positive thoughts and stall until bedtime. I lay down in bed, picked up my book, and tried to resume reading. However, I couldn't get that mysterious task out of my head. What would happen if I looked back? It was just a silly task, but for some reason, it had unsettled me like no other had before. I tried to convince myself there was nothing to fear and that it was all just a bug or prank. After a while, I managed to calm down and focus on the reading again, although the curiosity was still there, nudging me. When the app finally buzzed again, this time showing it was bedtime, I turned off the bedroom light and prepared to close my eyes. That's when curiosity won. Just a quick look, I thought. I went downstairs, my heart racing as I approached the office, and my eyes met the window. The moonlight illuminated the backyard, revealing shadows moving with the wind. Nothing but the rustling of branches. I laughed at myself, thinking how silly I had been. I went back up to the bedroom and continued with my night's sleep. The next morning came with a feeling of relief mixed with a lingering discomfort. I opened the app, and the list was as usual, except for a new category, uncompleted tasks. Beside it was yesterday's text with a red X next to it. Below, it displayed the message: "You chose not to follow one of our tasks. Consistency is key to success. We recommend you keep your commitment to future tasks to achieve your goals." I don't know, it was a standard message, but still. I felt threatened, fearful. I proceeded cautiously to work, and gradually, I managed to forget about it, and the day passed normally. I finished my shift, and as soon as I got into my car, my phone rang. It was a notification from Taskmaster Pro. With a sigh, I unlocked the phone and read the message. "Run the red light." My heart raced, and a sense of panic took over me. What the hell was happening? This couldn't be real, it was dangerous and illegal. I tried to ignore the message and kept driving, keeping my eyes on the road and trying to push away the disturbing thoughts. But the notification persisted, and I could feel the pressure mounting. I reached a red light, and the app alerted me again. "You have a pending task, run the red light." I was sweating cold, my stomach twisted with anxiety. I looked around, and there was no movement. I decided to follow the task and sped up. To my surprise, just as I had run the light, a massive tree branch fell right where I had been moments before. Had I not run the light, it would have surely hit me. I parked the car in a safe spot and opened Taskmaster Pro, wanting to understand better what was going on. The task list had been updated. Run the red light, completed. Thank Taskmaster Pro, completed. But what? I was definitely immersed in this now. It was the only thing I could think about. Was it magic? Something like that? When I got home, I read some comments on the app's page to see if anyone else had a similar situation, but to my surprise, the app had disappeared from the stores, in fact, from the entire internet. I continued with the tasks, but now compulsively checking the phone until reading time when, once again, a notification appeared to rob me of sleep. Check under the bed before sleeping, 10 p.m. This time I felt even more uncomfortable. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest, pumping adrenaline through a shiver down my spine. I decided to get it over with. With each step towards my room, the tension grew. Every dark corner seemed to hide something sinister. I approached the bed, took a deep breath once more, and bent down to check underneath it. Nothing. A temporary relief washed over me, but the fear was still there, pulsing in my veins. When I opened the app again, the task list was there, with the new task marked as completed. Things continued this way for the rest of the week, but today this situation got a little worse. I was coming home from work when a notification arrived. Open the front door and stand still for 5 minutes, 6:30 p.m. My stomach twisted with growing fear. What should I do? I parked the car and walked up to the door. My hand was sweating as I touched the cold doorknob. I turned it and pushed, opening the door to reveal the empty, dark interior of the house. I almost stepped in automatically but remembered the task. Not just that, but what could happen if I didn't follow it? I decided to stay there, standing. What harm could come from it? I glanced at the clock, 6:30 p.m. on the dot. I stood there, trying to distract myself by counting the numbers mentally. It hadn't been more than 2 minutes when I heard something behind me, like footsteps on the grass, but in a way I can't explain. They didn't sound normal, not like a person walking. It was less rhythmic, stranger, as if there were more than 2 legs. My eyes widened, and my heart raced. Fear took over me, paralyzing me. The shadows danced on the floor in the dim light of late afternoon, but nothing was there. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears. Time seemed to stand still. Every second felt like an eternity. I tried to stay calm, telling myself that all of this was just my imagination or some kind of strange coincidence, and that, anyway, it was better to obey the app. Now there was just over a minute left. However, the footsteps grew louder, approaching me, until I noticed that whatever it was standing right beside me. I could hear and feel its breath on my neck, a cold breath. This was real. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt my body freeze. The clock struck 6:35 p.m. Finally, the 5 minutes had passed. With a quick movement, I ran inside the house and locked the door behind me without even looking back, trembling with fear and relief at the same time. I risked a peek through the peephole, but I saw nothing but the empty street bathed in twilight. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I was tense, checking the doors and windows of the house when the phone rang again, and, by God, I had to restrain myself. "You're almost there. Now, look up." 7:15 p.m. My breath caught. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I felt pinned to the ground. My peripheral vision could see something large, a black figure hanging from the ceiling, but I didn't dare look. When it made the slightest movement, I ran like I never had before, up the stairs, 3, maybe 4 steps at a time, and locked myself in the bedroom, panting and terrified. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath and process what was happening. The silence in the room was almost deafening, only the sound of my rapid breathing filled the air. I was locked in, but whatever it was seemed to be outside, hovering around the house, waiting. The shadows moved strangely under the door, as if they were alive, and I could hear a soft, almost inaudible whisper echoing behind the wood. I was there, leaning against the door, trying to gather the courage to look at my phone again, at the cursed app that had brought all this terror into my life. I picked up the trembling phone and opened Taskmaster Pro, expecting to see some new terrifying instruction, some task that demanded another madness, but to my surprise, there was nothing. I called my brother asking him to come over. That was about 5 minutes ago, just before I started typing this. I don't know if that thing left, but I just received one last notification from the app, and it says, "Sweet dreams, 7:30 p.m. I think it has to do when we gone camping. It was her birthday. So I thought that was a good idea since she likes nature, and also the woods we were visiting have a lot of abandoned buildings and houses, even schools. My friend and I were just camping. We were also exploring abandoned houses. It was a hobby my friend and I like to do even though I'm often scared and she tries to calm me down. One of the buildings was a big white house, but also some red and green color is on it. My friend said it was definitely blood. I thought she was joking. But she told me that the other houses also had BL00D if you look through the windows. I didn't believe her since I only saw a normal house that very bit scattered. But on the big white house were biohazard signs. Despite that my friend wanted to go in, I first warned her, but she convinced me to go in. I think the place was for lab experiments since we saw a lot of BL00D and mini test tubes. But after some while I had an odd feeling. It was weird. The place looks weird. And it also smelled a bit rotten. So Elle decided to go out, but my friend still wanted to explore and she was quite stubborn about it, so I let her explore. One thing you have to know is my friend is quite brave type of person. I on the other hand more reserved. I don't know if it even has to do with it, but something is telling me why my friend is sick and behaves so strange is because of that abandoned lab we visited. And I still feel guilty about it. After the visiting, she said she had pain in her leg. She told me she accidentally hurt herself in there, and so we gone to home. But I decided to visit her, but my friend could barely talk. And she is very pale. I think she might has rabies since has foam in her mouth, I think, but for some reason it's still strange because rabies has usually incubation period for very long. And the foam was lightly yellow. I did call a doctor, but they said it's not big of a deal. But I think it is my friend doesn't want to seem to eat anything. And I still feel like something is wrong. And I decided to visit a doctor. I wanted to take my friend, but she didn't want it. But the doctor said my friend is okay, but I should not go to her house all the time. And just let her heal. And it wasn't rabies. Despite what the doctor told me, I decided to visit my friend. Honestly, I don't believe my doctor. How can my friend heal on her own? She barely feed herself. Later, while I was walking down the streets, I smelled something rotten, and it was a similar smell at my friend's house. Despite me couldn't opening her home, I forgot to take her keys. But I smelled something rotten. And through the window everything was covered with BL00D. But also green and yellow color was there too. And then I saw the back door, it was open. It's weird, how can this happen? My friend was laying on her bed just before I was going to the doctor. And I decided to call the police. Maybe some criminal done something to my friend. The police told me they were already on the way because someone else called them before too. I decided to go away. Maybe the criminal is still around. I also had almost no energy left. Probably this whole thing was stressing me out. Weirdly enough, while I was looking through my window, my neighborhood were no single human, and when I opened my window it started to smell rotten. This is very weird. So I decided to call the police. They told me I should stay at my place and not go out. They found many bodies, including my friend's body, and my friend is infected with an unknown virus. And it's highly contagious. I felt shocked. Is that why I also started to feel sick? I looked in my mirror only to see how pale I got. Update: I feel so weak and hungry. I don't know why I decided to go. It was stupid of me. Please don't explore abandoned buildings even if they seem harmless. Don't make the same mistake. I feel so hungry. I really want to eat something. Daddy, I lost a tooth. He lisped a bit as he said it, and as I held my hand out I saw that his hand had a tooth in it. It was one of the front ones, and I congratulated him on losing it so cleanly. I wondered if he had pulled it out himself, but I put that out of my mind. Brandon didn't even pull his own splinters out, and I really couldn't see him yanking out his own teeth. He was 6 and 1 month, as he liked to say, and this was the first tooth he had lost. He was late in that respect. Many of his friends had already started losing baby teeth, but he was giddy as he brought this one to me. Now the tooth fairy will come and take it away, he said, skipping off to continue playing. Ah yes, I had forgotten that part. Brandon had become obsessed with the tooth fairy after his friend Nina had lost her tooth. He thought of her as the blue fairy from Pinocchio, and he was very excited that she would come through his window and leave money for his teeth. He had asked what she did with all those teeth, where she got all the money, and 1,000 other things. I was a pretty creative person, and I had come up with all kinds of stories about what she did with them, where she got the money, how she came in without making a sound, and on and on and on. I was kind of glad that he had finally lost a tooth, because I was starting to run out of material and thought if he experienced it he might lose interest in it. We put it under his pillow that night, and I assured him that it would be gone in the morning and there would be money there when he got up. Then, of course, I fell asleep waiting for my wife to get home and woke up to find her sleeping beside me and the sun beginning to peek over the horizon. I went quickly, but quietly, and thanked my lucky stars that Brandon was a sound sleeper. He hadn't woken up yet, and I took the $1 I was going to put under there out of my pocket and prepared to make the swap. To my surprise, however, the tooth was already gone. No one had left money, but the tooth had disappeared. I looked around, thinking it had slipped out, but it was just gone. I left the dollar anyway, not wanting him to be disappointed, and went back to my room to get a little more shut-eye before the alarm went off. We never made it to the alarm, because Brandon came in waving the dollar and saying the tooth fairy had come. Look what the tooth fairy left me. He said it was all for me. I told him that was awesome, but internally I raised an eyebrow. The tooth fairy had always been a woman any other time he talked about her. Maybe, I thought, Brandon had just had a dream or something last night. He put the money in his piggy bank and I figured we could maybe put this behind us. 2 days later, as I put him to bed, I put my hand beneath his pillow and felt something strange. I took my hand out and found another tooth. "What's this?" I asked him. "Oh, I lost another tooth," Brandon said. No excitement, no hope that the tooth fairy would come. Just a matter-of-fact tone. I guess that was what I wanted. His obsession with the tooth fairy had ended when he had finally lost a tooth. He'd gone from being absolutely excited to absolutely unfazed, and that stopped me for a moment. "Why didn't you tell me you had another loose tooth, buddy?" "I don't know. It just kind of happened." I put the tooth back under his pillow, telling him to make sure to say something next time, and then I kissed him good night and put him to bed. When I went to put money under his pillow a little later, though, the tooth wasn't there. Instead, there was a coin. I took a look at it, thinking it was a $50, but realizing I was wrong almost at once. At first, I thought it was one of those weird chocolate coins you sometimes get for Christmas. Turning it, I realized it was just extremely grubby. It was heavy, like it was made out of brass or copper, and the surface looked dirty like it had been at the bottom of a well for quite some time. I started to take it with me, something in me wanting to keep it away from my son, but I put it back instead. It wasn't mine, after all, and by the look of it, it was probably something that he treasured. It had been back under his pillow for less than a few seconds before his hand went searching for it. His fingers took hold of it almost greedily as he clutched it, and I decided to take the dollar back with me. Brandon changed a bit after that night, but it's only in retrospect that I see it. He became very secretive, not my little buddy like he used to be. Brandon didn't want to play video games in the living room with me anymore. He didn't want to read stories at bedtime anymore. He spent a lot of time in his room, and he just seemed to be closing off. His mother laughed at me when I told her I was feeling a little hurt by it. "He's just being a kid," she said. "Kids go through phases sometimes. Don't take it so personally. In a couple of months, he'll probably be back to his usual self again." I hoped he would, but it was hard to ignore the physical changes that were going on as well. Not only was Brandon quieter, but it seemed like he had grown. He hadn't gained a foot in a single week, but sometimes it seemed his fingers were abnormally long, his arms were strangely jointed, and his face was oddly stretched. He would look at me sometimes, look at me like he was thinking about doing something that he knew would make me angry. I didn't like it, but he never did it right out in the open. Like I said, Brandon never came to sit with me or play video games, but I would sometimes catch him peeking at me from the hallway or from under the table in the kitchen. It was creepy, but I figured it was just little kid behavior. A month after Brandon lost his first tooth, I found another one in his backpack. Well, not just one. I found 5 hidden in the front pocket of his backpack after he left it on the kitchen table when he went to the bathroom. He had become pretty protective of the backpack, putting it in his room or keeping it close to him at all times, and I started getting suspicious of what might be in there. I didn't think it was drugs or anything. He was 6, but I thought it might be something weird or dangerous. What if he had a snake or something in there? So when he suddenly ran off to go to the bathroom, I knew this was my chance to have a look. I needed to sign his folder for school anyway, so I took out the folder and looked over the day's report before taking a peek in the pockets. The teeth were just sitting there, bumping together when I poked at them, but they didn't really look like human teeth. These looked more like animal teeth, and they were too strange to have come out of my son's mouth. They might have been from a cat or a dog, I suppose, maybe a. What are you doing? I zipped the backpack and turned around, looking like I'd been caught doing something I shouldn't. Nothing, just signing your folder. Brandon looked at me with a great deal of distrust, taking the backpack and going to his room without putting his back to me. I told his mother about the teeth when she came home from work, but she brushed it off again, saying that little kids often collected strange things. My brothers collected animal skeletons they found out in the woods, she said dismissively, and she got ready for bed. Thank goodness it's just teeth and not a whole skull. I let it go, but it was hard not to see what was going on. Brandon started looking like he wasn't sleeping well. He had huge bags under his eyes, and he was fidgety any time he was made to sit still, like at dinner or for homework. He would get short and agitated, muttering to himself in a way I couldn't understand. I listened carefully once when we were doing math homework, and it sounded like he was talking in a different language. He looked up when he saw me noticing, squinting at me with that look of distrust, and it broke my heart to see him like that. Brandon had always been my little buddy, and this sudden change in him was painful to watch. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the school. They needed to speak to me about something important. Brandon had been in a fight where he had knocked more than a few of the kids' teeth out. I came down right away, afraid that Brandon was hurt, but when I saw him sitting in the principal's office, he looked none the worse for wear. He had a bruise on his cheek, and his hands looked like he beat them against the wall, but he didn't seem injured or in distress at all. Quite the contrary, Brandon looked happier than I had ever seen him. I took a seat next to him in the office, waiting to see what they had thought was so important. We called you in not because Brandon has been fighting, but because of other rumors going around about him in class. Rumors? I asked. Yes, sir. The student he fought with said Brandon has been making strange deals with other students. Shook my head, not quite understanding. What kind of deals? They say he has been buying people's teeth. I shuddered, thinking about the teeth in the bag that I saw not long ago. I looked down at Brandon, questioning him with my eyes as to whether or not this was true. He looked back at me without hesitation, pretty much letting me know that it was. He's been trading his lunch for them. He's been trading other things for them, too, like toys and other small things. He has allegedly traded over 20 students for their teeth across 3 grades. Today, the student in question had taken the trade but refused to give him any teeth. Your son responded by beating the teeth out of his mouth. I looked back at Brandon, asking what he was thinking. He didn't bother to answer, just clenched his fist in his lap and looked at the floor. I think that was when it really hit me how much he had changed. The bags under his eyes were dark and deep, and his fingers were long enough that I couldn't see how anyone didn't notice. Each finger seemed twice as long as it should be, and as he clenched, I could see a 4th knuckle on each of them. The reason we called you in, sir, is to get those teeth back. I turned and looked at the principal. What do you mean? He looked a little green as he wiped his forehead with a napkin. We believe your son has the missing teeth, but he won't tell us where they are and he won't give them back to us. We can't seem to find them, and the mother is hopeful that the dentist can put them back in if they're not too badly damaged. If nothing else, they want them back so they can take them to the dentist and make sure the teeth are baby teeth and not permanent. Brandon hasn't said a word about where he put them, and we are deeply troubled by this behavior. I looked at Brandon and asked him where the teeth were. He shook his head, not saying a word. I asked him again, and when he shook his head this time, I heard something. Something nearly indistinguishable, but altogether unsettling. Something was rattling in his mouth. "We can sit here until you decide to give us those teeth, but you're not leaving until we get them back. I don't know what's gotten into you, but..." The idea that we wouldn't be leaving seemed to decide him. He bent slowly over the principal desk, making eye contact with the older man the whole time as he opened his mouth. 3 teeth fell out as he pushed his tongue out, and none of them appeared to be his. The teeth clattered onto the desk like old dice, and more than one of them had the root hanging from them. As he sat back up, I had the sneaking suspicion that he was holding out. The principal, however, seemed more than okay with what he had gotten back. He told us to go, saying that Brandon was suspended for 2 weeks, and I collected up my son as we headed for the door. The principal managed not to vomit before we got out of his office, but it was a near thing. We talked the entire way home. Well, I talked, and Brandon just sat there and said nothing. I told him I didn't know what all this was about, but that he needed to stop. This wasn't him, this wasn't like him, and he needed to tell me what was going on so that I could help. I was his dad, I wanted to help him, but I couldn't help him if he didn't talk to me. The whole time, he just sat there and stared at me. Most kids who are being chastised look out the window or look at their feet, but he stared directly at me in brazen defiance. His fingers kept flexing, and I saw him put a hand to his pocket more than once. I wanted to tell him to turn them out, to give me the tooth from that kid that he had kept, but something in me didn't dare. I was loath to admit it, but I was a little bit afraid of my son at that moment. He looked nothing like the boy that I had known for almost 7 years. My grandma used to tell stories about babies taken by fairies and the changelings that they left behind. This reminded me of those stories. The kid in front of me was so fundamentally different from the one I knew that it was almost like I was talking to a different person. As we pulled up in the yard, I told him he was grounded. No tablet, no TV, no dessert. Brandon didn't seem to care, he just walked inside and went to his room. His tablet was still on the charger, and his TV remote had been left on the door to his room. I didn't know what he was doing in there, but it clearly wasn't playing. He was way too quiet, and when his mother called to tell me she was working a double, I almost cried. I didn't want to be here alone with him more than I had to be, and that made me feel even worse. He didn't come out for dinner, and when I went to bring him his plate a little while later, I heard muffled voices as he spoke to someone. I tried to get the teeth, but they caught me. I didn't know who he was talking to, kind of thought he might be talking to himself, but when a gruff voice responded, I felt my stomach drop. "You'll just have to do better next time." The voice was unlike anything I had ever heard. It was deep and watery, like something from the bottom of a well, and it spoke in a way that made its mouth sound strangely full. It was devoid of any kind of kindness or charity, the sounds you sometimes hear when people speak to children. It was an authoritarian voice, the teacher, and they were not pleased with my son. "I'm grounded, they suspended me from school. I'm not going to be able to give you any teeth for at least 2 weeks. Your father has teeth," it said matter-of-factly, "your mother has teeth too." When he answered, he didn't sound afraid. When he answered, it was with cold assuredness. "They won't just give them to me. They don't understand what I'm doing." What was he doing? That's what I wanted to know. I gripped the doorknob, hoping they wouldn't hear me, and that was when the voice said something that made my blood run cold. "Then do not ask for them. Take them, like you did from the boy today." I opened the door in one fluid motion, and my son looked up guilty as I walked into his room. "Who are you talking to?" I asked. "No one," he said much too quickly. "I heard someone," I said. "I heard someone in here talking to you, and I wanted to know who it was, and where they went." That was a lie. I didn't think I wanted to know who they were. What I wanted was for them to never come back again. The person had sounded like some kind of demonic fairy from a kid's story, and I was afraid of what I would see if he did come back. "It's nothing," Brandon said much too quickly again. I was doing voices. I talked to him for a little while longer, but I got nothing. He wouldn't talk to me, he wouldn't tell me anything, and eventually I just left. I should have left it at that. I should have just left it alone, but I had to try one more time. It was late, about 10:30, which was pretty late for us, and I decided to try a peace offering. I felt pretty certain he was still awake. I had heard something moving around in there, and so I cut some of the pie I had made to go with dinner and walked to his room. I was going to offer him the pie and see if maybe we could talk. I just wanted to know what it was that had made him change so much. Most of all, I just wanted my son back. It killed me to have him act like this, but as the door came open, I got more answers than I had bargained for. It was standing over his bed with its arm going under his pillow, and in the darkness of his room, I realized it had to be what he'd been talking to. The pie fell to the ground, but I had a death grip on the plate, and I realized I had sprained my thumb once I was in any state to feel it. I didn't speak. I could barely breathe. As the thing turned to look at me, I realized my fairy theory might not be too far off. It was grubby looking, like something that's been living in a ditch. Its features were completely covered in something dark that had the texture of earth, except for the two large lamp-like eyes that protrude from its face like bubble lights. It was tall, something I realized as it took its full height. It had been crouching before, putting something under my son's pillow, and it had to stoop so as not to bang its head on the ceiling, which is about 9 feet from the floor. From its back, 4 insect-like wings protruded. They weren't large enough to carry it, but they were large enough to be noticeable. Its hands and arms, the fingers multi-jointed, were far from delicate looking as it wiggled them ceaselessly. I expected it to charge me, I expected it to attack me, but instead, it raised one huge finger to its face and made a shush sound. "Shhhh, you'll wake the baby," it whispered, and its mouth sounded like it was trying to swallow something. Then it smiled, and I saw not a double but a triple row of teeth inside its mouth. There's no order to them, molars next to canines, next to bicuspid, next to what appear to be fangs and shark teeth. Its mouth is such a mishmash of teeth that it's impossible not to feel a little woozy when you look at it. It pulled its lips down, somehow containing all those teeth, and before my very eyes, it vanished. My son was pretty upset when I grabbed him up and carried him out of the house. I put him in the car, and we waited till his mother got off work before taking him to a nearby motel. I told her what I had seen, as best as I could, and I think she believes there might be something going on now. My son is furious, saying he needs to get back home so that he can do his job, but he won't say what that is. Honestly, I think he's been collecting teeth for whatever that thing was. When I went back to get us some clothes and check the house, I looked under his pillow and found another of those strange coins. There's a box under his bed, and inside it's equal parts teeth and coins. There are around 20 of them, and they're sitting next to teeth of every shape and every size. Most of them are animal teeth, but some of them are definitely human teeth. I've taken the entire box with me, but the phone call I got from my wife before I left the house was what really worried me. She called to tell me that our son had locked himself in the bathroom, and she was afraid he was hurting himself. There's a weird squelching sound, followed by him yelling and crying. He had locked himself in the bathroom, but I went and got the manager to unlock it for us. What we found there will stay with me for a very long time. We're at the hospital now. My wife is in the ER room with him while I sit in the waiting room and wait for updates. The protocol states only one parent can go in at a time, and my son doesn't want me to go in there. He can't speak very well, but he made that very clear to my wife. I gave him space, not wanting to exacerbate his condition any more than I had to. I've got the box on my lap as I sit out here, and I'm not really sure what to do with it. Inside are the 8 teeth he managed to pull out of his own head before we got him restrained. Whatever this creature is, it must get its due, and my son was apparently intent on giving it that too. We'll probably end up having to take him to a mental facility, but I know he isn't crazy. I saw that thing, too, and I know it will find him no matter where we take him. So be very careful when you tell your kids about the tooth fairy. What comes to collect their teeth might be something far worse than even you could imagine.